We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Oh my God.
Joining us. Before I ask you any questions, I want to read what I think is your biography or parts of it, because I want the audience to understand who you are. And so I'm going to read this and you tell me if I've gotten anything wrong. So you're a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. You went to West Point. You got your commission in the Army straight out of West Point. You served for 25 years in the U.S. Army as a combat infantry officer and a special forces, a Green Beret officer. You were deployed 12 times to Iraq 3 times, Afghanistan 3 times. You were deployed to Syria, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Jordan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. You saw combat in many of those venues. You're highly decorated. You were wounded in combat, received a Purple Heart. You got a Bronze Star for Valor in combat, an Army Commendation Medal for Valor in combat. And then earlier this year, you found yourself working in Gaza under GHF, and I'll ask you to explain what that is in a moment. You were in Gaza from the 17th of May this year, 2025, through June 26th, 2025, which was last month. Is all of that correct?
That is correct, sir.
And the reason that I wanted to establish that before you tell the story that you're going to tell us is because very, very few Americans have been in Gaza in the last couple of years. And I don't know any others who have the experience in chaotic situations and combat situations that you have who've been there. And I think that really matters. Anyone who's been around combat knows it's enormously confusing, and having 25 years of experience around violence, I think gives you greater credibility because it suggests you can interpret what's happening accurately in a way that people who haven't had that experience probably can't. So with that, I want to ask you the first and most obvious question: what is GHF in Gaza?
So
Unc's hilarious. He said, why are the subtitles in Russian? I didn't even know that they were. Yo, good call.
Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was established to take over the aid distribution into Gaza, replacing the former United Nations aid delivery mechanism post blocking or cutting off of the Gaza enclave. So there was no aid going in up until May 26th when we started operations, and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was established to lead that effort overall. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I'm not sure in terms of what their actual status is in terms of a company or an NGO or a nonprofit. I don't know what they're classified as, but I know that their GHF is the overall lead for both of the contract mechanisms in Gaza.
So after 25 years as a U.S. Army officer, West Point graduate, Special Forces officer, all these combat deployments, all the decorations that you received, how did you wind up distributing aid in Gaza?
Well, sir, on May 13th, I received a phone call from the UG Solutions. UG Solutions is a subcontract for the security portion of this aid distribution method. They're stationed here in Davidson, North Carolina, where I live. I retired out of Fort Bragg, and they contacted me basically looking for experienced, recently retired or recently gotten out of the military, experienced combat veterans, special forces operations background. So they contacted me and explained the mission to me. Up until that point, till I got that phone call, I was not aware of what UG Solutions or the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was. So I was interested, and I listened to what they had to say.
The reason I'm asking you this is I know that after this interview airs, there will be a concerted attempt to discredit you as a man. And I'm certain, having seen this happen many times, that one of the criticisms we levy against you is that you were some sort of political activist with a political axe to grind or an ideological axe to grind. Are you? because it sounds like from the story you're telling now that you were a retired Army officer who received a call because of your combat experience. Is that correct?
Prior to that phone call on the 13th of May, sir, and remind you, I did retire on the 1st of January. I didn't retire years ago. Retirement through the 1st of January, and my last day in the Army was 1 March. I was very happy and content. My wife also served a career in the military. She is a retired career military officer. Between the two of us, we have 45 years of service. Between her and I, with my son, we've missed almost every birthday, every anniversary, every Christmas from the time that he was born to the majority of our marriage. And we're still married 17 years later. So I was very much comfortable and established in my retirement lifestyle. No political aspirations, no aspirations to go into another line of work. I'm starting school in the fall. That was my aspiration. I enjoyed making breakfast for my family, taking my son to school every morning, Boy Scout meetings, PTO meetings, watching the Golden Girls in the afternoon with a cup of tea, walking the dog. That was my life, and I was very content. When I got the phone call, I felt that initially, because I didn't know much about the situation, when they first called me, I said, hey, I'd like to take a day to kind of do my own research and just kind of understand what it's all about. My answer is not no, but my answer is not yes. So I took the day. I took the rest of the day. I believe it was a Wednesday. And I went through I started to read about GHF. Not a lot out there. I started to read about Safe Reach Solutions, which is the prime contract. Not a lot out there. I read a little bit about UG Solutions. UG Solutions had been the contract that sent contractors into Gaza in late January through March to control the Netzarim checkpoint once the ceasefire broke, or the ceasefire started, I should say, for the Palestinians that were allowed to then go back into Gaza City. So they had some credibility. It seemed like not many people had done contracts in Gaza. UGS did. So I figured that this would be an opportunity to link up with a company that had the experience. But I was more interested in the mission. I say this again, and I've said it again, I don't know Johnny Moore, the director or CEO or whatever the title is of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But there is something that he said that I do agree with, that there's nothing more Christian than feeding people.
Yes.
And in terms of the sentiment of doing goodwill, feeding starving people, I served for the majority of my career after being an infantry officer and going to Special Forces. The Special Forces motto, as you see in the picture behind me of 1st Special Forces Group, is De Oppresso Liber, to free the oppressed. That is our motto. I just didn't have that on my uniform. I lived that. The civilian population in Gaza, politics aside, political views, religious positions aside, they are being oppressed. Food, water, education, life, dignity. And I wanted to be a part of going in to help in some way. So I have no political aspirations. I have no political leanings. I have no desire to write a book or before doing these interviews, I don't even have social media, and I've never really been out onto the internet. This is all very overwhelming for me. But my wife was a big factor behind me going on the record. My wife being, again, a retired military officer, we understand a lot of the same values. And she explained to me, she said, no one else can tell this story. No one else was there. Not only were you there, you were on the sites, and no one else saw it through the eyes of your experience. In the places you've been, in the things that you've done, the lens you look at this through is different than most people have. You need to go on the record. The American people need to know this. My motivations in this are patriotic. I want to inform the American people, my fellow citizens, of what's going on in Gaza, what our taxpayers' dollars are funding, and what American citizens on the ground are being faced with. America needs to know.
So tell us what you saw, and I'm grateful to your wife for her encouragement on that. I think she's absolutely right. The United States is paying for this, and there is almost no information coming out of Gaza. The news media, of course, are barred. It's been going on for more than a couple of years now. It'll be 3 years in October, and the sense is that there's something profound going on, but of course, there's no way to know what's going on. So, what did you see when you arrived? What were your perceptions of Gaza?
So my initial perceptions of Gaza, just in terms of the physical aspect, is that I would just describe it as post-apocalyptic, something from, the akin to Terminator 2, when the T-100s are walking through the destroyed landscape. It's human depravity. It's the oppression of dignity. It's the entire area, like for example, in the south in Rafah. I saw pictures of Rafah prior to the current war, and there were nice buildings, there were beach resorts, there were, street lights and neighborhoods, and now it is leveled to the ground. There is not a building that stands, and the rubble is piled up. And as you drive through Rafah to one of our points, secure distribution site number 3 was in Rafah. So we would have to drive through the old southern Rafah corridor to get there, and all of the homes just in piles and rubble. And you can see, someone's couch that's hanging from a piece of rebar out of the second floor of a building, or a refrigerator smashed, or family photos that were on the wall that are now, shattered and broken. Like, these lives were just destroyed and taken. And that's the scene of Gaza. As on the news, airdrops were conducted over the last 48 hours, and journalists were prohibited or encouraged not to take video or pictures of the overhead scenery. Because if the world sees that, I think the world would step back and pause to say, what are we doing?
And I want to stop. Let me make sure I'm not muted. I'm thinking about the Civil War, not the Civil War, civil rights. I'm thinking about the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King. And I always heard, and I'm not even sure to what extent this is true, but with things being televised more. When did TVs come out? I'm sorry, hold on. But I'll look that up on the back end. But when things were getting televised more, and the rest of the world was starting to actually see maybe dogs attacking certain people and certain things that occurred in the civil rights movement, that's what created the pressure for America to act on what a lot of people, a lot of the civil rights activists were pushing for. It was the pressure that was created by the rest of the world and the rest of the country getting visuals on some of the things that Black people were going through. This is the same situation. This is why you would not want cameras in or journalists in. And I want to be very careful, because apparently I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I was hearing somebody say that, well, journalists are never invited into active war zones. I don't know to what extent that's true. I don't know. But clearly, when you have certain people come in, and certain people that are already here, like him, who's a Green Beret serving, and they're encouraged to not take pictures, it's for a reason.
First and foremost, want to give a huge shout out to everybody that continues to tap in with us, like and subscribe and join our community. If you haven't already, please make sure that you do. We look forward to engaging in some dope combo with you that can help us all elevate. So like, subscribe, and maybe even share the video if you're feeling real generous. On that note, we'll let you get back to the video. See you soon. Ew.
People want to hide what they're doing. People can sit here and say, oh, it's war, stuff happens like that in war. We know that a lot of war is a propaganda battle. Who can put out certain things and certain images and certain videos that are going to get the rest of the world to align with them, or to excuse, let's say, demonic behavior, and for us to sit back and say, oh, well, this is why. This is why, what Steve was saying earlier, why they have to convince us that whoever they're committing these acts against, they have to convince us that they're inhumane, that they're animals, that they're subhuman, for us to justify doing certain things. Put yourself in this position. If an animal was attacking you, how would you respond? You would do anything to kill that animal, right? So that's what they're trying to create. Let's keep going.
What have we become?
You've spent your life in combat zones. That's why I think your testimony is so compelling, because you have a frame of reference. You've seen a lot of destruction and a lot of killing in your life for 25 years. How would you compare what you saw in Gaza to what you've seen in, say, Afghanistan or Iraq?
Nothing compares. Nothing I have seen in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Baghdad, in Mosul, Sadr City, all throughout Afghanistan, Syria, the southern Philippines, some places where there's dense populations. I have never witnessed anything as brutal, destructive, violent, and I would say that steps far over our international laws of how we persecute wars and how we engage in warfare. We've long departed from that standard, and America is a part of it.
How is it obvious that America's a part of it? I know that we know academically the United States is paying for this and has always paid for it. But do you see American weapons? Do you see American military personnel? I mean, how enmeshed in this are we?
So the 314 government contractors under UG Solutions, the majority, not all of them, but in the high 80 percentile, are combat veterans from the military, directly from the military, combat veterans like myself. You have a mix of law enforcement. You have a mix of people that had experience in various security backgrounds. Within that military portion, there's a good portion of them that are special operations, Marine Corps, Navy SEALs, Green Berets. So all of the contractors on the ground are Americans. And the interesting part of that is that when we first entered Israel, I kind of had to take a pause, and I was like, are you kidding? Like we are in Israel, armed with fully automatic weapons and pistols and shotguns and stun grenades and machine guns, going into Gaza on a tourist visa. We are there on a tourist visa. So if my grandmother wanted to go visit Jerusalem, she would be in Israel under the same status that I was.
Why is that?
And I just looked up on ChatGPT as far as with the journalist. So based on what I'm seeing here is that it is common for journalists to be allowed into war zones due to circumstances. The circumstances and restrictions can vary depending on the conflict, the country, and the government involved. The role of journalists in war zones is to report and provide accurate, unbiased coverage of the events, which is essential for informing the global public. However, there are several factors that could influence whether journalists are allowed access to these key areas. Some of these factors are access restrictions, censorship and control. It says some countries like Israel during the ongoing conflict with Palestinian groups have occasionally imposed censorship or limited access to journalists, especially during intense military operations. This is done under the pretext of national security concerns or to prevent certain narratives from being amplified. ChatGPT is funny. This is done under the pretext of national security concerns, which they're saying like, okay, or to prevent certain narratives from being amplified. That's what he's discussing. The safety concerns, international. Now, the safety concerns of the journalists is interesting because Israel has been accused of killing a bunch of journalists. So I don't know to what extent that holds weight, but yeah, clearly in a situation like this, it would be vital for people to be able to go in and see what's going on, because whose words are we supposed to take? I hear a bunch of people saying those are Hamas numbers. You can't believe those numbers. Those are terrorist numbers, or those are Hamas reports, Hamas journals, Hamas articles. Well, when you don't allow any journalists, unbiased journalists, to go in there, who are we supposed to believe? Just the Israeli journalist? You see what I'm saying? Like, that's the whole point of having unbiased journalists observe what's going on in the situation. But neither here nor there.
At first, I didn't understand it, but then I went and I did some research as to why didn't we do a B1 entry visa as subject matter experts invited by the government or under a different authority. There's various entry visa options. And it dawned on me that, oh, well, if you want to submit for a form of B1 or a different form of the B2 under a work visa, one, that's expensive, and two, that takes time. You have to coordinate that ahead of time. And this mission was thrown together, and there's no one within SRS or UG Solutions that will push back against this, because we all know it. It was thrown together very hastily, and it was just kind of a mix of throwing so many parts together, trying to get it all to come together, that I think things were done to be fast and loose, as I would call it. And one of those was, hey, go online, fill out your Israeli visa, get your e-visa, tourist visa, $25, and come on over to Israel.
You said all of the contractors are American. The Israeli military, the IDF, leveled Gaza. Are there any Israelis helping to feed or take care of, sustain the life of the Palestinians, or is it all Americans who are helping?
So this is what was another aspect that was both interesting and concerning to me, that and I raised this issue early on because, when I use the term war crimes, people think that, oh, you're just exaggerating. Well, I'm well versed in the protocols of the Geneva Convention, the protocols of the laws of armed conflict, the protocols of international humanitarian law, because I had to know those things as an officer leading men in combat. I didn't have the option. Ignorance was not an option. So
right.
Some of the things now I don't have it, memorized, but there's some pretty key elements in it that kind of stand out. Like I don't know every word to the Constitution, but I can recite the preamble. So I know what some of them are in terms of what the don'ts are. One thing that struck me as concerning is that there are only 4 secure distribution sites in Gaza under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. 4. Prior to the blockade and prior to the stopping of UN aid going in, there were 400. So out of the 4 sites that we have, only 4, 3 of them are co-located within 150 to 200 meters from each other, all of them in the far southwest corner of the enclave near the Egyptian border. It's nowhere near the people that need it. North of the Netzarim corridor, which bisects central Gaza from the north. In the north, you have Gaza City and Jabalia. That is where the population right now is the most vulnerable, where you have death, starvation. They're isolated. No aid is going into there, and there's no aid sites there. So prior to us deploying,
and something that I want to point out, it's funny because you hear a lot of, on the Israeli side, even I think Trump split with Benjamin Netanyahu on this, which is, on the Israeli side, a lot of their leaders are saying that there is no starvation. Nobody's being starved. But then even Trump, matter of fact, came out and said, yeah, there's issues of starvation. There is starvation, and we need to play a role in that. So there's a lot of powers at play here. There's a lot of stuff that's going on at play here. But as I'm listening to this interview again, it can go by a little slow. But I don't know if it's for you guys, but especially in the beginning, it's very important for us to validate his credentials, because think about it, with a lot of these situations, and we hear these stories, this person saying this person saying that. This is a Green Beret with a Purple Heart that has fought, sacrificed, risked his life, got injured for our country, who's now going over there and telling us that he's never seen the things that he's seeing happen in Palestine or in Gaza that he's seen in his previous 25 years of combat experience, or however many years, he was actually in combat, but army experience, military experience. It's damn
prudent military planner mindset. I'm not in the army anymore, but I didn't, I still carry the skills. I did a little bit what I would call operational preparation of the environment. I did my research, looked at Gaza, figured out the population, where the population centers were, what people ate, where they primarily lived and what they did. And I saw that, okay, well, the entire northern enclave of Gaza is cut off and isolated, and none of the sites that we've put in are in that area. So who are we providing aid to? So the 3 sites out of the 4 that are all the way down in the southern tip of the enclave, all of them are co-located or nearly located with an IDF combat unit. In that area is where the IDF is actively conducting, and this is not an opinion that anybody can refute. This is a fact. You can look it up. The IDF is currently conducting Operation Gideon's Chariots. It's an offensive operation. It's not a defensive. It's not a security. It's not an aid operation. It is an offensive combat operation, and they are conducting that in the South, where all 3 out of the 304 sites are located. We established secure distribution sites to deliver and distribute humanitarian aid, not only co-located with Israeli combat units, but located in an active combat zone. I can't make it clearer to the leadership there and to the lawyers that I've spoke with at GHF and UG Solutions that is a war crime, verbatim, out of the protocols of the Geneva Convention, which last time I checked, the United States was still a signatory to, and the laws of international laws and international humanitarian law. Clearly, there's no question about it. So to say that, well, it's okay in this one instance, it's not. It's not okay. So just from immediately being there, I realized that the planning and the coordination for this operation had either been done by people that had no idea, no concept of planning at that level to take into all the considerations that you have to take into an environment like this. You can't just go into a mission like this and say, oh, we'll just wing it. You have to consider the legal, the political, the environmental, the cultural, the military aspects. You have to consider every aspect when you go into planning something like this. And it was obvious that had not been done. So
let me ask y'all a question, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who, and we have to always remind ourselves that when you're actually involved in the situation, in the war, obviously it can be a lot different than, us. We're sitting on the outskirts, we're fans in the stadium just looking at what's happening and observing. Obviously, people who are engaged in the situation are going to be the most extreme radicalized. But perhaps Israel, let me ask y'all this. Perhaps Israel's right. Hold on. Let me, I'm not running from y'all. Perhaps Israel's right. Perhaps war, this is what war is. Doesn't matter the amount of civilians. Let me hold on. Let me show y'all something. Perhaps Israel's right. I want to show y'all something.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it?
Well, let me just say that, speaking diplomatically, the world is a mess. I have been to those places, believe me. I have seen people that are dirt poor that then spend money on things that are not healthy. But it is exactly, I think, that out of that difficulty and challenge, it's a huge opportunity. Companies that have the capability of delivering a message that says you can help yourself.
Is the price worth it?
I like the idea of an American product being helpful to people in other parts of the world. I've studied democracy my whole life. They say, well, let's kind of just worry about ourselves and not worry about everybody else.
That's the wrong video. Hold on. Sorry about that.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Let me run that back again since I played it wrong the first time. My apologies. Listen to this.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
So who is this person, right? Who is this person? This is Madeleine Albright. So we've spoken about her before, and we've actually looked at this clip a while ago, but I think it's just relative to what we're discussing right now. When we think about how radical and extreme and how demonic, you know, when we see what's going on with Israel and Palestine, how far it's gone. This is Madeleine Albright, who was the U.S. Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, President Clinton. She made the controversial statement that the price is worth it regarding the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children as a result of the U.S.-led sanctions against Iraq in the 1990s, specifically over the Gulf War and during the ongoing sanctions that followed. Let me ask y'all. I'm gonna pull this up for you guys to read along, if that's cool with you guys. I want you guys to see what I'm looking at. All right, can you guys see that? Yes, you can. All right, let me give me a second. All right, so check this out. So Madeleine Albright, who was, I don't want to keep it full screen because I want to make sure that y'all can see. All right. So Madeleine Albright, who was a U.S. Secretary of State, we already went over that. So this is a 1996 interview. The sanctions were imposed after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990 and remained in place for years afterward with the goal of pressuring Saddam Hussein's regime to comply with UN resolutions. The sanctions severely restricted Iraq's access to food, medicine, and other essential goods, leading to widespread suffering, particularly among children. Does that sound familiar? Albright's comment, "The price is worth it," was in response to the question about the devastating impact the sanctions had on Iraqi civilians, particularly children. This remark sparked outrage and criticism, as many saw it as callous and dismissive of the human suffering caused by the sanctions. What if Israel's right? We should go to whatever extents necessary to rid this threat that we have of Hamas. It doesn't matter if we kill thousands of Palestinians. Doesn't matter if we kill women and children. That's just the price of war. War is brutal. What if that's the correct way of looking at it? Because the alternative way of looking at it, or what we see as the alternative way of looking at it, is not really the alternative way of looking at it. Real quickly, and I'm put that back up. We look at the alternative way of looking at Madeleine Albright and Israel being justified in doing and going to whatever extent necessary to rid the world of Hamas, no matter who they have to kill while doing so. We look at the alternative as, well, there's a way that we do war. You know, you can't violate war crimes. You can't commit these atrocities here. You can kill people, but you know, only a certain amount and done a certain way are civilian lives justified. You know, civilian deaths justified. It has to be done a certain way. How they're doing is, that's not the alternative. Or even if that is the alternative, that's not the alternative that's going to solve our problem. It's not realistic. The alternative, I feel like I can say, should be to just for us to say, we can't have wars. The alternative should be, this shows us that we just can't have wars. You can't half-ass wars. You can't, I mean, in my opinion, it's just not realistic. Even this Green Beret, he could sit here and say that, well, Israel, I've never seen anything like this done to this extent. And you know, I've been here. You know, yeah, there's certain one-offs here and there, but this leadership, perhaps this is showing us just why you can't have wars, why it can't be justified under any means. It can't be justified by any means. We can, once we start rationalizing war and why, well, this is how we go about fighting a war. This is the proper way to kill somebody. It sounds crazy, right? So perhaps Israel is just not playing the BS games that a lot of other people play around the world. And they're just willing to go as to, it doesn't matter what lengths. We identify that other group as evil, so therefore we're willing to commit any amount of evil to rid the world of that evil because that's a threat to us. And we told ourselves never again. So we're never going to allow our people to go through a genocide, Holocaust, anything of the likes. We will strike first and strike hard and aggressively before we allow somebody to do something to us. Protecting my family is not allowing somebody to come into my home and negotiating with them about, hey, you know, please don't harm my family. Protecting my home is stopping that threat before it even walks in the door. Neutralizing that threat. Perhaps we're being unrealistic with ourselves. We sit here and act like it's more realistic to have a balance with war. Well, you know, we can do war, but you know, let's have the rest of the world, like, let's agree on how much we can, how many lives we can kill, to what extent, you know, how we have to go about doing it. Well, we can't starve people, but we can't do we have to give people a heads up. Perhaps the right way to do it is to say, wait, maybe we just shouldn't have wars. Maybe if we just outlaw wars, then it'll force ourselves as humans, very capable beings, the most capable beings, I think a lot of us would acknowledge. Perhaps this would force us to just figure it out in a different way. It would be more justified if we said, you know what, we're going to all play a football game or a basketball game, or we play each country's top sport. There's a set of these sports where we're going to compete in. It'll be an Olympic type of setting, and this gets, I don't know, to resolve certain conflicts. Perhaps if you had to bring something to the table, you got a conflict between Israel and Palestine. All right, y'all bring it to the table. This is what, you know, we got a bunch of people agreeing on what you can compete in order to resolve that type of issue. But of course, I'm being a little bit silly while saying this, but is it really sillier than thinking that we can go to war and have rules within war about how to properly kill somebody? Which is sillier? It's not realistic. So when I listen to a Madeleine Albright and she's telling me that they believe that it was justified, or she believes that it was justified killing, what was it, 500,000 Iraqi children? For what? And that's the thing. What did we accomplish? Hold on. What did this war and killing 500,000 children actually accomplish? Let me look this up. Let's see what it actually accomplished. The 1990 through 2003, you guys can see this, right? All right. The 1990 through 2003 sanctions on Iraq following the Gulf War had a profound and devastating impact on the Iraqi civilian population, especially on children, as highlighted by widely criticized statement that amount of, we went through that. What the sanctions were supposed to accomplish: disarmament, they threw another A in there, disarmament of WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. The primary goal of the sanctions was to ensure that Iraq gave up its chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons program, which were seen as a threat to regional and global security. But wait, didn't they find there were no weapons of mass destruction? This was just another lie of Bibi Netanyahu. We already found that out. So what the sanctions were supposed to accomplish these weapons of mass destruction, they weren't there. But Madeleine Albright saying that it's justified killing 500,000 children. Let's go to number 2. Regime change or compliance. The international community, led by the United States, hoped that the sanctions would weaken Saddam Hussein's regime enough to either force his compliance with UN resolutions or eventually lead to regime change. Why do you want regime change? And you know what? It's so funny. It seems like the United States always wants to get involved in regime change when they can't or can no longer control whoever it is that they put in power or helped empower previously. And why am I saying that they helped empower previously? Didn't we already find out? So real quick, then we're going to come back to number 3. Didn't the United States give Saddam Hussein and Iraq weapons before we went to war with them? I may be wrong. Yes, the United States, along with other Western nations, did provide support to Saddam Hussein and Iraq during the 1980s, specifically during the Iran-Iraq War. This support was largely motivated by geopolitical interest and the desire to counter the influence of Iran, particularly after the Iran Revolution in 1979, which led to the establishment of an Islamic theocracy under Ayatollah Khomeini. So we were given the Iraqis war. I mean, the Iraqis weapons during the Iraq-Iran war. We were supporting them. But I guess when, now they're not fighting our battle anymore. We got to get rid of Saddam. Are we starting to see how the war, we just can't have wars. We just can't have wars. Let's go back to number 3, because that was number 2. What was where are we? Didn't we have numbers? All right, number 2. All right, here we go. Limiting Iraq's military capacity. The sanctions were intended to limit Iraq's ability to rearm and rebuild its military after the Gulf War, thereby preventing future aggression. So the first one never happened, right? Hold on. Wait, there were no weapons of mass destruction. Mass destruction. I'm wondering why you didn't point that out. Why you didn't point that out when you said that was the number one thing the sanctions were supposed to accomplish. Sorry, I don't type as fast as I used to. You heard? Look at Chatchit. You're absolutely right to point out that no weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq after the 2003 invasion. I should have emphasized that key factor earlier in my response, especially when discussing the goals of the sanctions and the ultimate outcome. This is why I'm not worried about artificial intelligence, because you still now here this person said that the goal, number one goal, was weapons of mass destruction. But they didn't point out the fact that there were no weapons of mass destruction found. So Madeleine Albright, your number one goal, right, based on ChatGPT, they're saying the number one goal was to eliminate weapons of mass destruction, and there were no weapons of mass destruction. But this demonic lady is saying that it was justified killing 500,000 Iraqi children. This is insane. This is insane. And this is the war that we decided to get into after 9/11. That had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. But I guess that's just how the game goes. Let me go back to this interview. Let's go back to this interview. Let me make sure I'm keeping up with y'all comments. Hold on. Steve wrote, after vetting, I would believe this soldier's point of view as factual over anything I hear or see on another news source, especially when forming an opinion. That's why I'm showing it. That's exactly why I'm showing it, big bro. Good old Madeleine Albright. I'll never forget this interview. We think the price was worth it. It's insane. And Bob Marley said, total destruction is the only solution. Hey, Bob Marley, and I know my dad's laughing at it because he knows exactly what I'm about to say. Bob Marley said it, and the most intelligent person perhaps that I've ever met. I told you about my neighbor that I grew up with, Philip. When I asked him, hey, what's the solution to all this? We were talking about, wars and killing and racism and all this other stuff. What's the solution? He said, maybe God should flood the planet and start a new one. Or he said, maybe God should flood the planet again and create a new race of people, and maybe that's the solution. And he just walked away from me. He didn't even say maybe that's the solution. He just said maybe God should flood the planet and create a new race. And he just walked away from me. After I asked my neighbor, what's the answer to this? And Bob Marley said total destruction is the only solution. It's the only solution, and it's the only place where this is ultimately going to lead to. When you start pressing these buttons and stuff, it's like, well, they did this, so I did that. Well, he hit me, so I hit. It's the most childish thing. War is the most childish thing and the most animalistic behavior, aka the most ungodly behavior us as humans can exhibit. And the fact that we do it in the name of God is even more despicable. Unc said to me, nephew, that would be like killing a person because they took your parking spot on an open street just because it was convenient for you to walk into the building that you wanted to access at. That's a fact. That's a fact. So in other words, we'd be like dolphins killing all the other fish in the sea because they're mad at sharks. Yeah, there's no justification of a lot of this stuff. Under the same idea that we funded and taught the Taliban how to fight in Afghanistan when they were fighting the Russians. All of these different groups that we prop up, we empower, we teach them how to use the weapons that we're giving them. But when they're no longer listening to every little thing that we tell them, now we got to kill them. We identify them as a terrorist organization. So then we rationalize killing them because the majority of Americans have no idea about the stuff that we're discussing. The majority of Americans, even when you think about what's the number one cop-out that people will use to not talk about Israel and Palestine and not have an opinion. Well, I don't know what's going on. Do you have to know what's going on? Maybe if Madeleine Albright knows what's going on, perhaps people who don't know as much of what's going on should be the ones in determining what's the right thing to do. Let's keep going.
In my mind, I was like, this is either complete ignorance or it's intentional. They were intentionally put here. So I don't know the answer to that. Someday that's going to come out when the truth breaks and the international community looks and opens this box and starts digging into this nasty problem. The truth will come out. So it's my hope that we didn't do that intentionally, because that would not only make us war criminals, that would just make us evil. So, but the fact still remains, 3 of the 4 distribution sites are in an active combat zone. The 4th site up in central Gaza near the Netzarim corridor is co-located with an Israeli combat unit, a tank unit, mind you. A Merkava tank company is located adjacent to the distribution site. So if someone were to look through the annals of history and see how the United States government participated in the distribution of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza, and they look at the maps and they're looking at everything, they're like, what was going on here? Why are you distributing humanitarian aid in the middle of a combat zone? It's a question that needs to be asked and needs to be answered, I think.
Do you have any sense of what the current population of Gaza is? Which is another way of asking, how many people have been killed? How many Palestinians have died in Gaza? Do we know?
Well, I don't think anyone has a firm number that we can all collectively trust. I know that the Gaza Health Ministry has a number. I mean, I haven't been able to validate or verify that, but I know that one thing I can tell you for a fact is that people have been killed. I've seen it. Like, it's a fact. People have been killed. What the current population is now, I know that prior to the blockade, kind of the last census for Gaza that was taken in, I believe, 2018, the population was declared to be around 2.21 million. What it is now, I don't know, but I would assume that the population has been greatly decreased. What I do know about the population, outside of the demographics of the size, is that the majority, a far majority of the population, is completely isolated from the central southern portion of Gaza, and they're completely isolated in the south, or excuse me, in the north of the Netzarim corridor in Gaza City. So that would be if you took everybody in New York and crammed them into to southern Manhattan and said that's the only place you can be out of all of New York City. It's a nightmare, and I don't know why. Well, to be fair, I do know why it's happening. I don't know why we're accepting it. I don't know why we're a part of it, because it's a war crime to do that. It is a war crime to intentionally displace the civilian population on the battlefield in combat operations. What is displacement? Well, moving people from where they live to a place that they don't and not letting them go back. It's in the fourth protocol of the Geneva Convention, and we just turn a blind eye to it.
All right, I want to take a little bit of a slight turn. We're probably going to have to pause there on that interview, but you guys are free to go and check out the rest of the interview. I recommend it, just to get some more insight and more perspective on what's going on, because a lot of times we don't know what's going on. We hear this propaganda on this side, we hear that propaganda on this side. We don't know how to decipher between what's real, what's not. But our eyes, we like to say that our eyes don't lie, or that our eyes are not lying to us. You can't convince me that I'm not seeing certain things that I'm seeing, but we just don't know to what extent it's happening. But when you have a gentleman like this who comes on, gives his insight, has the credibility, has no there's nothing that he would gain, I would assume, from. I mean, there's always things to look at what you could gain, but as far as what he's risking and coming out, I don't think that the risk, I don't think the gains outweigh the risk. So definitely commend this gentleman for being willing to speak on a lot of this stuff. It's Dak. Just want to thank you for checking out our video and visiting the OG Network. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure that you give us a like. And if you're looking to join a community of inspired individuals striving for purposeful abundance, subscribe. And if you're feeling real generous, share the video with some friends and family. All right, I'll see y'all soon. Ew.